Kiera Kensington had always loved weddings, the music, the lights, the fleeting magic of the night, but she never expected that one dance would change everything. The reception was in full swing, the grand ballroom shimmering with golden chandeliers and flickering candlelight. Couples swayed on the dance floor, laughter and conversation blending with the soft melodies of the live band. Kiera sighed, swirling her champagne flute absent-mindedly as she watched her best friend twirl across the floor with her new husband. "One dance," a deep, smooth voice murmured beside her. She turned, startled. A man stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit. His dark hair was slightly tousled, his sharp jawline accentuated by the dim glow of the candles. His eyes, intense, strikingly blue, locked onto hers with quiet confidence. Kiera hesitated. She had no idea who he was. He wasn't part of the wedding party, and yet something about him was magnetic, impossible to ignore. "Come on," he coaxed, offering his hand. "Just one." Maybe it was the champagne, or maybe it was the way his voice sent a shiver down her spine, but she placed her palm in his without another thought. As soon as he pulled her into his arms, the world around them faded. His hand settled firmly at the small of her back, his grip warm, steady. He led effortlessly, his movements smooth, precise. Kiera found herself lost in the rhythm, her body following his as if they had done this 1,000 times before. "You dance well," she said breathlessly. He tilted his head slightly, a hint of amusement in his gaze. "And you don't." She let out a soft laugh. "I'm just surprised. Most men at weddings barely know how to sway properly." "I like to be prepared," he said, his tone teasing, but there was a quiet intensity beneath it. Kiera studied him, trying to place where she had seen him before. There was something familiar about him, the way he moved, the way he held himself. But before she could ask his name, the song slowed to an end, and he released her, his fingers lingering just a second too long. "Thank you," he said softly. Before she could respond, before she could ask who he was, he turned and disappeared into the crowd. Kiera stood frozen, her heart pounding. Who was he? And why did it feel like she had just met someone who would change everything? The wedding had ended, but Kiera couldn't shake the memory of that dance. It haunted her, the way his hands had guided her through the music, the intensity in his gaze, the way he had disappeared without a name. She had tried asking around, but no one seemed to know who he was. It was as if he had stepped out of the night itself, only to vanish back into the shadows. Days passed, then a week. She told herself to forget about it, but it was impossible. The world felt a little dimmer, the air a little less charged, as if something had been stolen from her that night. Then, completely out of the blue, an invitation arrived. A cream-colored envelope, thick and expensive with embossed gold lettering. No return address, just her name written in elegant script. Inside was a single card. "Kiera, join me for dinner. 8 o'clock, the Azure Room." No signature, no indication of who had sent it. Her pulse quickened. It didn't make sense. No one in her life would invite her to one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, certainly not in such a cryptic way. It had to be him. She hesitated, weighing the risks. But something deep inside her urged her forward. At exactly 8, she stepped into the Azure Room. The restaurant was breathtaking, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, soft candlelight flickering against the pristine white tablecloths. A string quartet played in the corner, the sound rich and intoxicating. A waiter approached immediately, as if expecting her. "If you'll follow me," he said, leading her through the hushed elegance of the restaurant to a secluded table near the window. And there he was. The man from the wedding sat waiting for her, dressed in a dark suit that fit him so perfectly it had to be custom. His presence was as commanding as she remembered, his gaze steady as she approached. "You came," he said, rising to his feet. "You left me no name, no explanation," Kiera said, sliding into the seat opposite him. "Just an invitation to the most exclusive restaurant in the city." His lips curved slightly. "Would you have come if I had done it any other way?" She considered that. Maybe she wouldn't have. Maybe the mystery had been part of the pull. "Who are you?" she asked. He leaned forward slightly, the candlelight casting warm shadows across his face. Noah Blackwood. The name sent a jolt through her. She knew it, everyone did. He was one of the youngest self-made millionaires in the country, known for his tech empire, his ruthless business acumen, and his complete disinterest in the social scene. And yet here he was, with her. "You're surprised," he observed. "Obviously," she said. "You built one of the most powerful companies in the world, and yet you show up at a wedding uninvited just to dance with a stranger." Something flickered in his expression. "I was invited by the groom, but I didn't intend to stay long until I saw you." Her breath caught. "I don't do things like this," he admitted. "I don't chase people, I don't send invitations, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about you." Kiera's heart pounded against her ribs. She had never been the kind of woman who attracted the attention of men like him, men who moved in circles of power and influence. "And you expect what from me?" she asked carefully. Noah studied her, as if measuring his next words. "A chance." A waiter appeared then, pouring wine into her glass, breaking the intensity of the moment. Kiera took a slow breath, grounding herself. As the evening unfolded, she found herself drawn in by him, not just his wealth, not just his confidence, but the way he listened, the way he seemed genuinely invested in what she had to say. By the time the plates were cleared, she was no longer sure what terrified her more, that he had found her, or that she wanted to see him again. Kiera hadn't expected to see Noah again so soon. But less than 24 hours after their dinner, a sleek black car pulled up in front of the bookstore where she worked. She was shelving a new shipment of novels when a hush fell over the shop. Customers stopped mid-sentence, their gazes shifting toward the entrance. Curious, she turned, and there he was. Noah stepped inside, effortlessly commanding the space. His presence was magnetic, his tailored charcoal coat draped over his arm, his sharp eyes scanning the room until they landed on her. "You tracked me down," she said, setting the book in her hand aside. "You left before I could ask for your number," he replied, his voice smooth but intent. "I don't like unfinished things." Kiera crossed her arms, tilting her head slightly. "And I don't like being pursued just because I'm a mystery you want to solve." "That's not what this is," he said, taking a step closer. "If it were, I would have lost interest already." Something in his tone made her breath hitch. The weight of his words, the certainty behind them, it unsettled her. "You're persistent," she noted. "When I want something, yes." A charged silence stretched between them. Around them, the bookstore remained unnaturally still, the customers pretending not to eavesdrop. Finally, Kiera exhaled. "Fine, you tracked me down, what now?" "I want to take you somewhere," Noah said simply. "Where? You'll see." She hesitated. But there was something thrilling about the way he looked at her, as if he saw beyond the surface, as if he already understood she needed more than just empty gestures. Against all logic, she grabbed her coat. Outside, the black car was waiting, a driver already holding the door open. Kiera slid into the leather seat, her pulse unsteady as Noah joined her. The city blurred past the tinted windows as they drove, the hum of the engine the only sound between them for a while. Then, as if sensing her curiosity, Noah finally spoke. "I want you to see something important to me." She turned her head. "You don't seem like the kind of man who shares things easily." "I'm not," he admitted, watching her closely. The car eventually pulled to a stop in front of an unassuming building. From the outside, it looked nothing like the world of luxury he clearly belonged to. But the moment they stepped inside, Kiera understood. It was a foundation. A space filled with children's books, learning materials, and quiet corners designed for reading. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with carefully selected stories. "You built this?" she asked, turning to him. "I fund it," Noah corrected. "It's a literacy program for underprivileged kids." "Reading changed my life when I had nothing. I wanted to give that to others." Kiera stared at him, her chest tightening. "I didn't expect this." "Most people don't," he said, watching her reaction closely. "They only see the surface." She ran her fingers over the spine of a well-worn book, her heart unexpectedly full. "Why show me this?" Because I want you to know me, Noah said, his voice softer than before. Not the version people read about in business magazines, the real me. Something shifted in that moment. The air between them grew heavier, charged with an understanding deeper than words. For the first time since meeting him, Kiera wasn't just intrigued. She was afraid because this wasn't just a game to him. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't just a game to her either. Kiera had never been one for impulsive decisions, yet here she was, standing beside Noah in a place that felt deeply personal to him. The quiet hum of the literacy center surrounded them, the scent of well-loved books filling the air. Children sat in reading nooks, their voices hushed but eager as they turned pages. She had spent so much time trying to figure out who Noah was, the elusive, commanding man who had swept her into a dance and then into his world. But now, as she watched him kneel beside a little boy struggling over a sentence, she realized something. He wasn't just a man of power and wealth. He was someone who carried the weight of his past, using it to shape the future of others. Kiera had never been interested in men like him, the ones who moved through life untouchable, their emotions locked away behind polished exteriors. But Noah wasn't what she expected. He wasn't trying to impress her with extravagant gestures. He was showing her something real. When he finally stood, his gaze met hers across the room. There was no arrogance there, no expectation, just quiet intensity, as if he was waiting for her to decide what this meant. She wasn't sure what came over her, but she stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You didn't have to show me this. I wanted to." His answer was simple, but something about the way he said it sent a shiver through her. A woman approached, one of the volunteers, and greeted Noah warmly before turning to Kiera with a curious smile. It's been a long time since Noah brought someone here. Kiera's breath caught. Noah's expression didn't change, but there was something in the way he glanced at her, something unspoken. The volunteer continued, oblivious to the tension now crackling between them. "We always tell him he should bring someone who understands why this place matters to him." Kiera swallowed. She hadn't realized how much this space meant to him, not just as a philanthropic effort, but as a part of who he was. Noah gave a small nod to the volunteer, effectively ending the conversation, then turned back to Kiera. "Come with me." She followed him through a side door that led to an outdoor terrace overlooking the city. The air was crisp, the lights of the skyline stretching endlessly before them. He leaned against the railing, watching her carefully. "You're quiet. There's a lot to think about." He tilted his head slightly. "Are you thinking about leaving?" She hesitated, not because she wanted to leave, but because she didn't know how to handle what was happening. "Why me?" Noah's expression didn't waver. "Because when I saw you at that wedding, I knew." "Knew what?" "That you weren't like the world I live in." His voice was calm but filled with something she couldn't quite name. "That you wouldn't care about the things most people do." Kiera held his stare. "You barely knew me." "I didn't have to." The weight of his words settled around her like an embrace. She had spent so much of her life playing it safe, building walls to protect herself from heartbreak, from disappointment. But Noah was standing here, breaking through them without even trying. She could walk away now. She could tell herself this was too much, too fast. But the truth was, she didn't want to. She stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared." His fingers brushed against hers, a silent reassurance. "So am I." The confession sent a tremor through her. Noah Blackwood, the man who seemed untouchable, was admitting that this, whatever this was, frightened him too, and somehow that made all the difference. She let out a slow breath. "Then let's figure it out together." Noah didn't hesitate. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss against her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. And just like that, everything changed. Kiera had never been the kind of woman who let herself get carried away by a man, especially one like Noah Blackwood. But as she stood beside him on that terrace, the city lights stretching endlessly below them, she realized she had already crossed a line she couldn't come back from. Something had shifted between them, something undeniable. It wasn't just attraction, it was deeper than that, more dangerous. Noah's fingers still lingered against hers, his touch warm despite the crisp night air. He didn't rush her, didn't try to push her into something she wasn't ready for. He was simply there, waiting for her to decide. And she had. The next few weeks moved in a way Kiera had never experienced before. Noah didn't just pursue her, he made space for her in his world. And despite her initial hesitation, she found herself letting him in. There were late-night drives through the city, stolen moments in quiet cafes, and long conversations that stretched until dawn. He took her to places she had never been, the kind of restaurants where the waiters knew his name, the kind of art galleries that didn't even advertise their exhibitions. But it wasn't the luxury that captivated her. It was him. He listened. Not just in the way most people did, waiting for their turn to speak, but truly listened. When she talked about her love for books, about the stories that had shaped her, he remembered. When she mentioned an old childhood dream she had long given up on, he didn't dismiss it. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, she found herself in his penthouse for the first time. The space was sleek, modern, yet not as impersonal as she had expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, and soft lighting bathed the room in a golden glow. Noah stood in the open kitchen, pouring them each a glass of wine, as if he did this sort of thing all the time. And maybe he did. But something about the way he glanced at her, the way his expression softened just slightly when she walked in, made her think this was different for him too. He handed her the glass, watching her over the rim of his own. "You look exhausted," he said, his voice low. She let out a tired laugh. "That's what happens when you spend all day on your feet." His gaze flickered with something unreadable. "You don't have to work there forever." She tensed. "I like my job." "I know," he said, studying her carefully, "but you could have more." She set her glass down a little too forcefully. Not everyone has the luxury of walking away from things just because they can. Noah didn't flinch at the sharpness in her tone. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice quieter now. "That's not what I meant," she exhaled, rubbing her temples. "I know, it's just... I've spent my whole life trying to prove I can stand on my own. I don't want to be someone who relies on me." The question hung between them, heavier than she expected. She met his gaze, her throat tightening. "I don't want to lose myself in this." Noah's expression shifted, his usual confidence tempered by something quieter, more vulnerable. "I don't want that either." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant hum of the city below. Then, as if sensing she needed to shift the conversation, he reached for something on the counter, a small, wrapped package. "What's this?" she asked, eyeing it warily. "Open it." She hesitated before carefully peeling back the wrapping. Inside was a book, an old edition, the spine slightly worn but well kept. The title made her breath hitch. It was a novel she had mentioned once in passing, a book she had loved as a child but lost years ago. She looked up at him, overwhelmed. "How did you—" "I pay attention," he said simply. The weight of the gesture settled deep in her chest. It wasn't about the money or the effort, it was about what it meant. And in that moment, she knew. This wasn't something she could walk away from. Not anymore. The fire crackled in the grand stone fireplace of Noah's penthouse as rain streaked down the towering windows, casting blurred golden reflections of the city lights. Kiera sat curled on the plush sofa, the old book Noah had given her resting in her lap, her fingers tracing its worn spine. The gesture still lingered in her mind, settling in a place she had long kept guarded. Noah leaned against the opposite end of the couch, watching her with quiet intensity. He never pushed, never demanded, he simply existed in her space, waiting for her to let him in further. "You never told me why you don't do this," she said finally, breaking the comfortable silence. His brow lifted slightly. "Do what?" "This," she gestured between them, "relationships." Noah exhaled, his gaze shifting to the fire for a moment before returning to her. "Because people always want something," she frowned. "Everyone wants something, Noah. That's not a reason to avoid connection." His jaw tensed, as if weighing how much to reveal. "When I was younger, before the company took off, people saw me as someone with potential." Once I had money, they stopped seeing me as a person entirely. I became an opportunity, a stepping stone. Kiera's chest tightened. And you think I see you like that? No, his answer was immediate, firm. That's why this is different. But that doesn't mean I don't have to unlearn years of caution. She studied him, realizing just how deeply his past had shaped him. She had assumed his confidence was unshakable, but beneath it lay something else, a man who had learned to guard himself too well. Kiera placed the book aside and shifted closer, her voice softer now. You don't have to prove anything to me. For the first time, something vulnerable flickered in his expression. Neither do you. The weight of those words settled between them, unspoken fears and hopes intertwining in the space they shared. Noah reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. Stay tonight, her breath caught. It wasn't just the request, it was the way he said it, as if he wasn't asking for just one night, but something more. She nodded. The night unfolded in quiet intimacy, no expectations, no need for grand declarations. Just the warmth of his presence, the steady rhythm of two hearts learning to trust. Days turned into weeks, and Kiera found herself slipping further into Noah's world. But the strangest part? It didn't feel like a whirlwind affair. It felt inevitable, like gravity pulling her towards something she was always meant to find. One evening, after closing the bookstore, she stepped outside to find Noah waiting beside his car. He leaned against the sleek black exterior, his coat draped over one arm, his expression unreadable. You didn't tell me you were coming, she said, surprised. There's something I want to show you. The drive was quiet, the city lights blurring past as they left the familiar streets behind. Soon, the towering buildings gave way to open landscapes, the hum of traffic fading into the stillness of the countryside. Eventually, Noah pulled onto a private road lined with towering trees, leading them to a breathtaking estate perched against a lake. The house was elegant yet inviting, with sprawling windows that reflected the silver moonlight. Kiera stepped out of the car, turning to him in confusion. What is this place? Noah's expression was unreadable. I bought it. Shock rippled through her. For what? He took a slow breath, his gaze steady. For us. The words sent a shiver through her. I know this is fast, he admitted, stepping closer. But I've spent my life building things, companies, investments, wealth. None of it ever felt like enough. Then I met you, and suddenly I wanted something different, something real. Kiera's heart pounded as he reached into his coat pocket, retrieving a small velvet box. Her breath hitched. Noah opened it, revealing a ring, nothing ostentatious, nothing flashy, just something elegant, timeless. Something that felt like her. I don't want to wait, he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. I want to build a life with you, here, now, marry me. Tears burned at the back of her throat. She had spent so much of her life afraid of losing herself in someone, afraid of trusting too much. But this, with him, it wasn't losing herself at all. It was finding something she hadn't even known she was searching for. Yes, she whispered. A slow, breathtaking smile spread across Noah's face as he slipped the ring onto her finger. And in that moment, standing under the vast night sky with the man who had changed everything, Kiera knew this was only the beginning. The wedding was intimate, held at the estate overlooking the lake, the air filled with the scent of blooming jasmine and the sound of laughter. Kiera stood at the edge of the balcony after the ceremony, the ring on her finger glinting in the golden light of sunset. Noah wrapped his arms around her from behind, pressing a kiss to her temple. Happy, he murmured. She turned in his embrace, looking up at him with a soft smile. More than I ever thought possible. He brushed a loose strand of hair from her face, his thumb grazing her cheek. Good. Because this is forever. She leaned into him, her heart full. Forever sounds perfect. And as they stood there, wrapped in each other, the world melted away, leaving only them, together, always.